Okay. Welcome to Among Thorns. Been going over the series on pornography addiction, and so I've been talking about the three different aspects of uh, pornography addiction. Went over some physical, some mental. There's still a lot of different stuff that we could talk about on both fronts, and that I intend to get into. But I wanted to highlight the third portion of this, the spiritual side of these attacks, because while thankfully there is a growing body of information about pornography and its negative effects, and there's studies, there's a lot of different channels. Uh, One thing I noticed though when I researched this in the past, both for me and then as I was planning these series, uh, the spiritual side of things is often overlooked or just completely left out. Within Christianity, more often the topic is just kind of put aside as awkward if it's mentioned at all. It's referenced as, well, it's a sin, it's bad, don't do it. On the secular side, it's often highlighted as just coming down to chemicals, neurochemistry, and I don't think either of these is really truly sufficient. Um, to minimize pornography as just a sin is overlooking the natural physical processes that play into it. And on the inverse of that, to say it's just natural is just as problematic. Imagine you're fighting, a 1 versus 3 battle. That would be really difficult just as is, right? But now imagine you're doing that and you're going to completely ignore one of your opponents. You're not going to even acknowledge that they're there. Well, suddenly you have the opportunity to be stabbed in the back at every chance. The chance of victory was slim before, and now it's gone. Possible. Um, so while we may not see the spiritual realm, that doesn't mean we have to be blind to it. Just as we can see branches moving without seeing the wind, we can infer spiritual activity from resulting consequences, right? Um, I want to read, let's see, Ephesians 6. This is a well known verse. 6 verse 12 says, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." Now, this refers to a few different things. The kingdom of heaven is not put up against other kingdoms. We don't war against other nations. But it also talks about the evil rulers, authorities of the unseen world. The Again, I have mentioned it before, but Mere Christianity. Let's see, it's not Mere Christianity, but one of the C.S. Lewis books, the Screw Tape Letters. It really goes into detail from a fictional standpoint. This world that we don't see and that we really need to be aware of. We don't want to fixate on it, but to ignore it, I think, is very dangerous, especially when it comes to the realm of addiction and pornography addiction. Um, so speaking of those attacks, a few to watch out for. One are dreams. Now, of course, you can have dreams that are natural occurring things, and I think the majority of them are. But there are certain ones that I think that you can definitely make an argument that it is a spiritual attack. People can be manipulated, and so while we ourselves can be manipulated, other people can as well, so they can play into that. There's one that I want to call the convergence of events that I'll get into, and then of course all manner of other things, deception, external thoughts that are kind of injected, and you're just kind of thinking, what? That I didn't think that. Where did that come from? But I'm going to pinpoint two of these tonight to keep this short. And I apologize. It's late. I realized I had to do a video. I had the information set aside, but then I was like, oh, I need to get this done. I already put it off. I was going to do it yesterday. So I'm going to get this going. Let's see. So when it comes to dreams, the main thing, you have a dream, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But at least in my experience, if you have, there are certain dreams where it's just different. I can't actually tell you what the difference is. I'm no expert on dreams, right? But and we have dreams of a sexual nature sometimes just because, it's our emotions or our hormones playing out. I can't get my beanie. It's like crooked. It's bugging me. Anyway, so that's kind of a normal thing. We're used to that. We have those dreams, sometimes inappropriate, sometimes just about, our spouse if we're married. And so that isn't an unnatural or odd thing to have those. But I know, I'm not going to go into detail, thankfully, but I have had dreams where you just know. There are certain ones I've had that are just imprinted into my mind. Not going to describe them, but just to explain that the very nature of them was twisted. It was unnatural. Being spiritual, maybe there just aren't words to describe them. I don't really know. But I think the best way I would describe it, it's like the dreams have like an alien, intoxicating aspect to them. The main thing, though, if you have a dream like that, if you've experienced that too, is to just be aware that after having those dreams, you don't wake up and it's done, and you're just like, oh, okay, I'm good. That was unpleasant. I didn't like that. Now I can get on with my day. You are going to face temptation that day. You need to be aware of that right up off the bat. You need to guard against it, and you need to really take it to God, honestly. If you want to be victorious, you don't want to be fighting this on your own. I'll mention that in a minute. Another one to be aware of. Now, I mentioned people. There's not a whole lot to say there. Just be aware that, people can be manipulated. It doesn't mean they are the enemy, right? We struggle not with flesh and blood, but we're social beings and we're affected by people around us. And so it's entirely possible that you can have people that, an overly flirty coworker or a friend that wants to talk about inappropriate things like that you just need to be aware that there may be people that you need to avoid or be careful, be guarded around. So not much to say there. Now, the convergence of events. This one is one that I think you've got to look out for, right? You need to be aware if it's happening, that you need to be on guard. Now, as far as combating the spiritual nature, if I have time, I'll get into that tonight. But otherwise, I'll plan on that in my next episode, which I'm hopefully going to do tomorrow or Friday. Now, this is what I call a convergence of events because I don't really know what you would call it, right? But that is when things just line up too perfectly. Not in a good way, not good perfect, but okay, so a hypothetical is, I'm a guy, so I'm going to go from my perspective, but say I'm a teenager and I've got my girlfriend over. You're not allowed to spend time alone in your room because your parents are wise enough to know that that's probably not a great idea. But suddenly your little sibling gets a broken bone. He has to go to the ER. The parents have to leave suddenly. All of a sudden you are alone with your love interest. You think to yourself, well, okay, I don't want to give in, so I'll go and turn the TV on. We'll just watch a show, but then the show you end up watching, it's romantic or a horror one, so you end up start cuddling, teenage hormones, etc., etc. Disgusting, right? Now, that's a simple example. But if you think about things, I'm sure I've had these types of things happen so many times in my life that you begin to see a pattern. And you're like, okay, this is not a coincidence because this is happening too often, too many times. You have temptations. You recognize, okay, my hormones are kind of elevated right now. I need to be careful. My sex drive is just inflamed or whatever. Um, you have to then guard yourself. But then when it's around those times and you also have all of these other events, typically it's when it's outside of your control. Um, those things you have to watch out for. You know, it's my personal opinion that they are manipulation. I don't know how things work in the spiritual realm. I don't see it. I don't really want to see it. I think that would be quite intimidating, right? Or confusing, maybe both. But these are two things that you just have to guard against. Dreams, this type of convergence of events. You know, I believe that God works in the same way. I've heard people use the word, I can't remember what they call it, but you know, you meet up with an unlikely meetup. You see someone, you get the chance to really pour into their life. You make a difference. You know, God has providence. God has moved things behind the scenes and pulled strings. But I'm firmly of the opinion that the enemy also is able to do those things. May not be able to directly manipulate us, but that doesn't mean he can't manipulate things around us. And so we have to be aware of that. Now, I do want to add First Corinthians 10:13, probably one you've heard as well, but it says, the temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. Now, I do want to say that doesn't mean that the temptation isn't going to feel like it's so bad that you have no choice but to succumb. It doesn't mean that the way out isn't going to be uncomfortable as well. You know, maybe it's you have a day at home, your family's out, you planned a game all day, relax. You're gonna be watching shows or playing on the computer, and then suddenly you are aware that you're being tempted to look at pornography, and so the way out there is what? Not to be at home by yourself on the computer. Now you can bull through and say, no, I'll just resist. But direct resistance against addiction is probably one of the worst ways that you can overcome it. Now, I have heard it said that the number one way to fail at a pornography addiction, at any addiction, is to try to overcome it on your own. And I do believe that's true when it comes to we need other people to pour into our lives to help us. But in regards to the spiritual, this is 100% true. Because if we just face it on the physical and the mental front, and we leave ourselves undefended on the spiritual, we will fall. Now, I'm running out of time on this one, so I'm not going to probably go into too much. But I will say that the one thing that I want to add when it comes to the spiritual side of things is that God already knows everything that's going on. He knows every thought in your heart. He knows every wicked desire. He sees everything. We can't hide it from him. Like Adam in the Garden of Eden, you know, they're trying to hide from God, a very pointless exercise if ever there was. Be open to God about what is going on inside you. When you have these temptations, bring them to God. Ask him to help you. That alone isn't going to be enough. But if you don't involve God in this, then you can't assume he's going to reach down. And I forgot to turn my light on. It's really dark. It's dark in here. But anyway, he's not going to necessarily reach down and rescue you if you don't ask him to do so. I remember many times that I didn't want to pray to God. Part of it was shame. Part of it was that I didn't really want to be rescued. You know, I didn't bring it to God because really there was a really big part of me that wanted to indulge in the sin. And so I knew that if I prayed, that if I brought it to God, that if I asked him to help me, that he might, then I wouldn't be able to do my little sin, right? So that's the one thing that I'm going to leave it with. And then I'll probably get into more in the next episode. But when you know that things are happening that are outside of your control, be it dreams or just blocks falling into place that are setting up obstacles for you, or you're just really, really having a difficult time, bring it to God. Number one, I believe that should be the first thing that you always should do. In my experience, there are other things that you need to do to ensure victory, but you're not going to beat this without God's help. So, thank you guys. Sorry that this one was kind of slapped together, um, but we'll get into this again tomorrow, and I'll try to do a better job. See you guys next time.